I called the attorney that drafted the paperwork. Unfortunately, he was no help, and he said, well, they didn't ask for a title search and didn't get a title commitment. It happens. Is it his fault for not asking? Don't know. Hey guys, Zach here with Real Estate Revealed. Today in our podcast, we're going to go over the importance of title work and why it's so important. I had a recent transaction here with a personal friend of mine purchasing a property from me. I am in Arkansas. We can practice dual agency, very transparent with all parties in the process, and I truly believe that this property would not have been sold or had finished, had closed without me being on both sides, and I think you'll be able to see why. There's a lot of legwork in this, so let's get right down to it. My friend Rose was going to purchase a cabin from me on the Spring River in Arkansas, okay? And they're buying the property from Mr. James, okay? Well, Mr. James bought, him and his wife purchased the property from the original owners who built the cabin farther back. I don't have exact dates. But what happened is that I listed the property from Mr. James to help him sell the cabin. Whenever we got under contract with Rose, we went through everything, and we sent everything to the title company. The title company calls us and said, "Hey, we have an issue. There's a break in chain of title." I said, "Okay, what happened?" So we're going to take us all the way back from when Mr. James first purchased the property, okay? When he bought the property from the original owners, they talked together. They went to an attorney, and then that attorney drafted the paperwork exactly how they wanted it, and the purchase went through, and it was filed in the courthouse, and here we are today. We thought everything was good. When then the title company, when it's their job to check back. They go back at least 30 years. They need to go back. Sometimes they go back more, depending on the circumstances. Well, this is well within the 30-year period. Whenever Mr. James bought the property from the original owners, here's what happened. The original owners owned the property in their personal names. A year or two before, they had moved the property from their personal names into a trust, okay? And if you sell real estate, you're into the title world as far as insurance and things like that, you know what just happened. When Mr. James took possession of the property, he bought it from the owners from their personal name, there's where the title issue happened. When the original owners owned it, they should have sold the property to Mr. James from the trust. So a trust, whenever a property goes into a trust, think of a trust as a completely separate person. It's a whole other entity. No matter how many beneficiaries there are or people there are in that trust, the trust is a separate person. So when the original owners transferred it into their trust, that trust should have been the one to transfer it to Mr. James. Doesn't sound like a big deal. And when you're talking about it like this right here, it's really not. However, where the issue comes about is that now we're here at the closing table with Mr. James and Rose, and we can't close because technically Mr. James does not own it. Even though he's paid taxes on it this whole time, he doesn't own the property. That trust still does because it wasn't conveyed from that trust. So, trying to go back and find the people who actually sold it to Mr. James, they're deceased. Now what do you do? Well, I called the attorney that drafted the paperwork. Unfortunately, he was no help, and he said, well, they didn't ask for a title search and didn't get a title commitment. It happens. Is it his fault for not asking? Don't know. We're not here to play the blame game, but this is the reality that we're in. So we're just trying to figure everything out and get this property closed for my friend Rose and sold for Mr. James. So I find out that what the name of the trust is, okay? So then I do some more research, and I find, through a lot of digging, I find the attorney's office in a completely different state who actually drafted the trust documents. I call them up, and they say, well, you're in luck. The trust has not been dissolved. As I said, actually, we have notes here where the owner wanted to dissolve it about 2 years ago, and then it just didn't do anything. They were gracious enough to give me the owner's name, Through more research, I found where she lived. She was in Tennessee. It took me 2 weeks to get a hold of her. Lives out in the middle of nowhere. Not very good cell service, no internet to speak of. Had to snail mail everything to her. But I was finally able to get in touch with her, and when I finally did get her on the phone, she's like, "We had this taken care of years ago. Why are you calling me?" I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm not here to put blame on anybody. In order to get this cleaned up, because I know you don't want to have any problems with this whatsoever. You don't need this coming back up, so I'm just trying to get this cleaned up to where, you know, we can all move forward." She understood. However, she's on her own timeline, which they're on their own timeline, right? We are at the mercy of the people's, you know, everybody's timelines, right? In their time frame. This process took a matter of an additional month and a half to get this closed. And this only happened because I personally took my time to track down where the trust was drafted, find the owner of that trust, work directly with the title company, and that title company, you know, because we're doing snail mail and everything has to have a wet signature, that no DocuSign, no electronics, it has to physically have actual signatures. So we're waiting for the mail to go back and forth, and if you know, if you're like me, the mail's kind of spotty. Sometimes they do what they're supposed to do, it gets there in 2 days. Sometimes it doesn't get there for 2 months. So, you know, we're sitting on pins and needles waiting for these documents to be transferred back and forth between actually it was the original owner's daughter, who's actually a member of that trust, the only surviving member in that trust. So luckily, we were able to find the owner of that trust or the beneficiary of that trust in order to do all this. The point is, guys, have a title search completed, get that title commitment, have title insurance. There's been a lot of times where, you know, that's just one example. And it actually, you know, luckily for me, it turned out well. And it took an extra month and a half to get this closed. Rose is happy, Mr. James is happy, and the original owner's happy because it's all cleaned up now. You know, if there was another agent representing the buyer or the seller, if it was 2 agents involved in there, I can't speak that this may not have gotten completed. It could have been sold. There would have been a cloud on the title. There's lots of reasons why you want to have a title search done and make sure that chain of title is clean and correct. Because I would hate to buy a property and next thing I know there's a cloud on my title and then somebody comes back years later and says, "Nope, that's my property legally." And you know what happens? Worst case scenario, if I hadn't have done that, we went ahead and sold that property and that original owner found out, you know what, down the road, hey, I found this document, you know, this wasn't done correctly. She could go back and she would have had a legal claim to that cabin. And my friend Rose, even though she'd spent the money and purchased it and renovated it and updated it, her hands would have been tied. And she'd been mad at me that she'd spent all that money just to fix it up for that owner. I hope this has been kind of, you know, enlightening and educating, you know, to let you know that, hey, doing those title searches and spending that little bit of extra money in order to make sure it's done correctly, it's well worth the investment, because later on down the road, you don't want to be sitting in your home and somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, I need the keys to my house." That's kind of a worst case scenario and a nightmare. Hopefully that doesn't ever happen to you. Hope this has been enlightening. Guys, click that subscribe button, click that bell, and follow and look for our next video.